Tengeneza sheria ili mambo ya vijana wa Kenya, ajira ipatikane. Vijana mamilioni wanahangaika madukani vijijini kwa sababu wamemaliza shule lakini hakuna mpango ya vile watapata ajira.
We are concluding the public participation on the new law on housing. We want to tell them that in Parliament we shall also be expeditious in dispensing with that law and giving you a new law. Ili wakisitisha ile ingine rais, na tunajua sheria haina shida. Those who captured our state, they have also captured our judiciary to undermine, to sabotage all government programs that are benefiting the people of Kenya.
That's the leader of majority, and just before him was the president, of course, speaking after that decision by the Court of Appeal. And of course, it has serious ramifications because as of now, there's a possibility that employers may not deduct the contributions for the affordable housing, the housing tax, if you may call it so. But because the chairman is here, Finance Committee, what is your interpretation of what just happened at the Court of Appeal last week? Should employers deduct or not?
That is a very difficult decision for me to make because as the National Assembly who I joined on the court case, the question was the ruling that was done I think a week or so ago was that on stay orders that the National Assembly joined with the National Treasury and KRA was asking for stay orders to continue collecting the housing levy, and just to debate the judgment of the ruling, the housing levy was said to be unconstitutional for two reasons. Just to quote Justice Majanja and forget the other lawyer, the other judge who said that one of them that it lacked a legal framework, and two, it was constitutional. And I dare tell you, Sam, that one of the reasons that we got across the public hearings that we have been conducting the last 15 days was the feeling was that there need to be a relationship between contribution and access to that housing. Mm-hmm. And everyone agreed that we have a crisis in housing, we need to do job creation. That is a message that came across or 99% of the public hearings that we said. The interpretation was, how do we resolve this? And now, following the court ruling that said, and that's why, Sam, one of the reasons why some of us have an issue, or I would say it's uncomfortable with some of the contradictory rulings that have been made by the courts, is on one side you say, fine, the only reason why this is unconstitutional is because it doesn't have a legal framework. But on the other hand, you want to attempt to gag the only institution that would provide a legal framework.
You're losing me, Honorable Kuria.
Okay.
What is contradictory in the ruling of the Court of Appeal?
Let me try again. So on one hand, let me give you two court orders. So first of all, they say that the housing levy is unconstitutional. That's a ruling.
Yes.
So and then the question is why? They say one of the reasons is because it doesn't have a legal framework.
Right.
So by the time they are ruling that the housing levy doesn't have a legal framework, the Leader of Government Business in Parliament, who is the Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, has tabled a bill that has been delegated the Commission to the Joint Committee of Finance and Housing, the Finance and National Planning, and that of Housing, Urban Planning and Development, to public participation, and then says, no, you cannot conduct participation on this, which we respected, okay? And we found a way of going through it, that the court really realized that the way that we're conducting public participation was, public hearings now, was actually constitutional.
You made that clarification earlier, but if you say that it's contradictory because the court is sort of, quote unquote, your words, gagging the House, is there a relationship between the Affordable Housing Bill 2023 and the decision of the High Court and subsequently the ruling by the Court of Appeal?
You know, the drafters of the Constitution drafted 3 arms of government. And the 3 arms of government form one government. there's only one republic, the Republic of Kenya. And the 2010 Constitution talks about the Republic of Kenya shall have free, independent arms of government.
So please tell me.
But who does? Yes, of course there is. The three arms of government should work in, I don't want to say in concurrence, but in check and balance.
That's not my question.
For the objective.
I'm asking this. Is there a relationship between the Affordable Housing Bill 2023 and the decision of the High Court and subsequently the ruling of the Court of Appeal?
That's debatable, Sam. It's a yes and no answer. Yes, because as a regular Kenyan, when you study the court ruling of, not even just that, even us, even now, the committee, the joint committee, when we were doing public participation and we are drafting this law, we are taking cognizance of the court ruling.
Okay.
Because the role of the court is to interpret the law, and the role of the legislative arm of government is to make law. So we cannot operate in a vacuum. We understand that the sources of law in this country are Parliament and we call it jurisprudence law.
Jurisprudence, yes.
So where a court has pronounced itself in a matter, if Parliament attempts to make a law in contradiction with the jurisprudence law, then that law will not see the light of day. So I cannot.
But you and I can agree that the bill you're considering at the moment is not before the court, isn't it?
It's actually not before the court. The Affordable Housing Bill is certainly not before the court.
Okay, correct.
However, it's actually before the court. Let me take it back. Because there are two cases that have been subjected to court
I'm talking
on
about
the bill.
The Court of Appeal, because High Court is already
you said the court.
with
No, you said the court.
Finance Act.
So that's fine. You talked about the court.
Yeah.
So to answer the question of the court,
now I'm talking about the specific Court of Appeal.
You say that later. That's fine. You said the court first?
I'm clarifying what my question was about. So let me just reframe it so that for your clarity. Is the Affordable Housing Bill before the Court of Appeal?
The Affordable Housing Bill, to the best of my knowledge, is not before the Court of Appeal. However, there is an adjoined court in the High Court that challenged the legislation of this particular law, citing the reference of the ruling of the High Court.
So you don't know what.
And consequently, come on, the people that went to court challenging the public participation on the kind of Affordable Housing Bill have right to appeal. And I assure you, when they go to appeal at the Court of Appeal, they will certainly reference.
Okay.
They will certainly, because remember, jurisprudence law talks about
I want
any
to listen to Senator Kajwang. Before I do, so finally, what should employers do? Because tomorrow is the last day of January. What should they do?
It's a difficult question.
But you see, no other arm of government has got the duty of interpreting the decisions of the court. Because the courts, they interpret the law, and once they render their judgment, unless you appeal, it needs to be applied as ruled. And from the Court of Appeal, I think the Federation of Kenya Employers has made it clear to employers not to deduct that particular levy because of the decisions out of the Court of Appeal. And whereas one would argue, like Kuria is, I see what his complication is, because the letter of the bill is considering is not in court. But the spirit of the bill is dealing with is in court. And this disingenuity, we saw it. Parliament is famous for this. I don't know whether it's Muturi who advised Kuria and the president to do this. Because remember in the CDF, there was a CDF Act. It was taken to court by civil society. It was declared unconstitutional, and the court made certain directions. What the National Assembly did was to come up with an NGCDA, the National Government CDF Act, so that whereas the court was considering the CDF Act, they argued that we have a new law. It is disingenuous. And I think that it will come to the same position, because if there is a certain philosophy that is upheld by the court on the finance bill and the particular provisions on housing levy. That philosophy is going to apply without alteration to the bill that my friend Kuria is considering. And that is why I said at the onset, he can be clever, he can come up with a new bill, and it is my view that, there are people who call it impunity. It is impunity. It is legislative impunity. It is not a crime, but it is a sin. It is a legislative sin. So he's allowed to do that kind of disingenuity. However, at the end of the day, assuming on this particular matter, the courts uphold that that levy is unconstitutional, what happens to the bill that is spending public resources to go around the country? And that is why, if there was no ulterior motives, a responsible government or administration would hold its horses. You have heard Ichung'wah say that they are going to come up with a new law. You have heard my friend Aaron Cheriot say that we are going to pass a new law, and I hope that if Aaron is watching, that he's not going to kill the institution of the Senate by agreeing with those who think that this matter does not involve county governments. Because if he does so, he does not only kill the Senate, but he kills county governments and he kills the Constitution. So it is clear that there's a political exercise to try to sanitize and to clean up, but unfortunately, in cleaning up, they're making a bigger mess, as I've demonstrated to you. A violation of Article 110, a violation of the functions assigned to national and county governments, and even if they are going to do robust public participation. And maybe Kuria should tell us, assuming 90% of Kenyans tell them that this is a bad idea, what happens? And they've already taken positions. They've already taken positions that this is a good law. They've already taken positions that hii lazima ipite, wapende wasipende. Why then are they carrying out public participation?
Have they said that? Sorry, have they said that?
I've heard it from the leader of Majority, who is a sponsor of this bill, and I've heard it over the weekend, that the president is not going to be derailed. I have heard it that the judiciary has been captured by the same people who have looted government and this country. It has been said. And even if we're in Parliament, I would be able to substantiate
that. Those particular words, have you heard them?
Yes, they have vowed that it is the president's housing agenda will not be derailed. And many Kenyans, even right now, are sending me messages, and they are wondering, why is this thing so important? Why is it such a matter of life and death that we can go to the extent of threatening the judiciary, violating the Constitution, taking matters upon our hands, rubbishing the Senate and county governments, and yet the president today, the jobs he claims have been created through housing. They were created without a housing levy, a mandatory housing levy.
Can I correct that, Sam?
Please go ahead.
The jobs that His Excellency the President is talking about that have been created through the affordable housing. In the Finance Act of 2023, we passed the housing levy, 1.5% of the gross of employee and a matching fund of 1.5% of employer. We just reinstated that in the Finance Act of 2023, it reads that those funds will be spent only for the purpose of affordable housing. And what we went to do is consequently amend the appropriations bill to include the amount of money that will be collected from the housing levy to add into the State Department of Housing for construction of affordable housing. I dare say, without further consideration, that the jobs that His Excellency the President is saying that have been created were actually created from the housing levy. Because the housing levy was first introduced into law last year through the Finance Act of 2023. Then, when he dare say that His Excellency the President and everyone else is breaking the law, let me tell you, I think that one of the most political decisions that the President needed to make was the appointment of cabinet administrative secretaries. And when that decision was challenging the courts of law, those CASs have never reported to work. And yet, they were the largest political pillars of the Kenya Kwanza administration. So if this administration was so keen on breaking or disobeying court orders, trust you me, for all political reasons, the first one to break would have been the CAS's decision. But what do we mean? What do you mean? The independence, the independence of Parliament. The independence of Parliament is when His Excellency the President talks about that the judiciary may or may not do this. The same way he may talk about Parliament, the same way the leader of majority may or may not talk about Parliament. But trust you me, if Parliament doesn't have the numbers to pass a law, and Parliament may not have the numbers. Sometimes you've tried to whip our political party to a particular voting decision, and they haven't turned up. Sometimes because they have held up in their constitutional mandate. It has happened several times. He will tell you that there are accurate number of times where we have not been able to conduct government business because we don't have quorum. I don't have quorum
but when you're voting on a critical
even when we had a voting on a critical decision, there are times when the National Assembly of the Republic of Kenya of the 13th Parliament, which I sit in, have lacked quorum.
When?
So I'll tell you an example. We have postponed voting on the NGCDF Act. We have postponed voting on the NSSF. I think one of them, either the NSSF or the NSSF Act, was postponed once or twice. We've had bills postponed for voting because of lack of quorum.
When did you vote on NSSF Act?
Sam, we vote on different bills every day, so I may not remember when, but I assure you, one example is NGCDF Act of 2023. We actually postponed the voting because we couldn't get quorum. Even when there were members that were that was ready, and that's the 13th Parliament. In the 12th Parliament, there was a bill by the former member of Kimilili, the Honourable Chris Omalwa, which was actually extending the term of Parliament that lacked quorum. Every time, yes, I have a better example. Every time we have had a debate on the 2/3 rule.
That is not in this Parliament, Honourable Kuria.
Last Parliament. This Parliament. No, let me give an example of this Parliament. Sorry. The NGCDF Act of 2023. One example.
Yeah.
The NGCDF Act of 2023 was postponed twice because of lack of a quorum. And that is a fact.
So tell me, the High Court spotted the gaps. Well, of course, you don't entirely agree with that's why there's an appeal. Okay, not you, but the Kenya Kwanza administration, that's why there's an appeal at the Court of Appeal. But how is this bill curing the gaps that are identified by the High Court?
So the High Court of Kenya, respectively, talked about, and I say this respectively because as a legislator, I respect the interpretive arm of government. It identified in two areas. Said one, the housing levy was discriminatory because it was only targeting the employed and not the unemployed. So it was being discriminatory against the employed people. But most importantly, and which is a fact, an idea says as a matter of fact, that the housing levy lacked a legislative framework because every levy, if you talk about the fuel levy, if you talk about the transport, the tourism levy, so every levy in this country that is collected actually has an act of parliament that backs it. And that is why even before we got to the court ruling, there was the bill for the affordable housing at the drafting stage that let us have a legislative framework that defines who contributes to this, who benefits from it, how much percentage they pay for it, who comprises the board, how do they subdivide that money. And I assure you, and Sam, I will dare you, look at the bill that has been proposed to us and look at what will be tabled to Parliament.
So tell me, if you said that only the employed were targeted, how are you carrying that question to have those that are not employed to also be targeted?
Some may forget that the responsibility or the decision of lawmaking is just not my decision. That's why in the wisdom our constitution provides for public participation. I need
I'm asking you a specific question because you have conducted public participation.
Yes.
In fact,
so they have. So
tell me, what is the cure of discrimination specific to non-employed persons?
Again, this I cannot purport to make the decision on behalf of my committee or the Joint Committee. However, my personal view as Kuria Kimani, as CPA Kuria Kimani MP for Molo, I dare say that if the contribution have to be non-discriminatory, the fund has to be contributed by those who are salaried, and those who are not. That we must devise a mechanism.
Is that contained in the bill?
Sam, the bill is a proposal before Parliament. And if you like...
Is there a cure?
There's a cure. There's a cure of making sure that the levy is not just a contribution by those that are employed, but also the non-employed should find a way. We must find a way of making sure that those are not employed must contribute.
Let me read section 4 of the bill as proposed.
Okay.
The levy shall be at the rate of 1.5% A of the gross salary of an employee or the gross income of a person received or accrued which is not subject to the levy under paragraph A. What is that? The gross income of a person received or accrued which is not subject to the levy under paragraph A.
So, although the bill expressly says that a salaried person will pay 1.5%,
yeah,
and a non-salaried person, which we'll assume is what is read by 4(2)(b), and I said assumed because it's not expressly said, the gross income. The gross income is anyone who earns this income. The problem in this law is when we talk about gross income, is it rental income? Is it turnover? Is it self-employed income? Is it, what kind of income is this? It's undefined because A defines salary. B doesn't define what kind of income this is. And every income, for all tax purposes, has to be specific. You either talk about salary income or rental income or gross turnover or as per Corporate Tax Act. And then, let me take you.
That is missing, Honorable Kuria.
It certainly is.
Senator Kajo, I'll come back to you.
No, hold on.
Sorry, Honorable Kuria.
We agree that is missing, and that is what this public hearings is about, and this is what this joint committee hopes to cure.
So, do you see a solution? And okay, I know you've raised your preliminary objections, if I may use that term here, on even how it's being considered by the National Assembly in exclusion of the Senate. But is there a chance that this bill cures what the High Court pointed out?
I don't think it does. And it was not on just that specific element that Kuria has talked about, because there is some litigation on Article 40 of the Constitution that talks about property rights. Now, first of all, on the question you've asked, this bill was very poorly drafted. As I'd pointed out in the Memorandum of Objects, that conclusion that it does not affect counties, and we already prosecuted that. But for every bill, a good legislative drafter will ensure that there is no ambiguity. And that is why the first section of a bill, after the citation and the short title, you have definition of terms. Mm-hmm. Something as critical as gross salary, which has been referred to and which forms the baseline for deductions, has not been defined in this bill. This is a bill that was drafted in a rush, perhaps drafted with emotions, or perhaps drafted to satisfy or to show that some people were playing their role, because I know how Parliament sometimes operates. The other aspect is on whether this bill can stand up to what is under Article 40 on property rights. And there's been an argument that has been peddled by the government that, you see, even the fuel levy, everyone pays. Then it goes and constructs a road that goes to Moyale. That's fair enough. But in this case, you are saying you pay, and then you now need to go and demand that house. You now need to get a house. You have no choice on where that house is. You cannot, if perhaps I want a house in Rusinga, I want a house in Mfangano, on the lakeshore. This does not give me that choice, because ultimately this is meant to benefit an individual. And that is why, if you look at Article 40, that right to property, mm-hmm. that right cannot be varied or dictated by anybody. And I believe that this is going to be the leg upon which this matter is going to collapse, even in the Court of Appeal. The constitutionality and the fact that it denies Kenyans the right to make a free will and free decision on the kind of property rights or the kind of property investments that they want to make. You cannot equate it to roads, because roads are public goods. You don't put in levy, you don't put in your contribution to the levy fund, and then you go and own and demand a piece of road. You go to Moyale and say that this 1 kilometer was my contribution. But this is completely different. And that is why people have said, and I think that Kuria, from his public participation, a lot of people have said, fine, you can define a fund, but let it be funded through other mechanisms. For example, the National Housing Corporation, I've already demonstrated, has been drawing money from funds, and that fund has been established by Parliament, and that fund is supported by appropriations from the National Assembly. That could work, but making it obligatory flies against the free will and the right to property that is enshrined in that constitution. There are various options, and I want to suggest to Kuria, because what concerns me is that as a chair of a committee, I think you're putting him in a very complicated position, because he's been sitting, listening to all these people, some saying this is a bad law, some saying this is a good law, and then now he's taking a position it is a good law, and yet people have made presentations before him. His committee has not rendered a decision. In fact, his presence and contribution tonight is against the standing orders, because the standing orders say matters before a committee shall not be referred to until a report is laid before the House. So, so that person who today came and said this is a very bad law, who today came and said this is a very badly drafted law, who today came and said that we do not need this law, sitting at home and listening to the chair of that committee is asking himself whether he wasted time and money and effort to appear before Parliament.
The only difference is, Sam, here, is that, first of all, for the first time in history, and Sam, you've got to give the committee that in Parliament this accolade, that we've led the most rigorous, the most open to the public scrutiny of any public debate that we've had. And everything I've been referred to, as I've said, this is what the public told us. And let me give an example. One of the clauses in the bill talks about 10% of the country, that for you to own a house in the affordable housing scheme, you need to contribute 10%. I tell you, we have had a very varied view saying that 10% is good, 10% is small enough. We've had people tell us that people living with disabilities are not able to pay 10% deposit. We've had people telling us the board seem to be skewed in a particular way to affect particular decisions. And, I think we're used to a parliament that receives a bill and takes it as a gospel truth and stamps it as exactly as it is. And I dare tell you, Sam, and then let me tell Kenyans, we do not conduct public hearings and public participation for the sake of it. We do it because we benefit from the views of Kenyans. And I did not say in any particular chance, and I'll dare Senator to tell me, any stand I took on this debate. And the only reason why I agreed to come to this discussion tonight was to tell you that, we have this bill before Parliament, and this bill is not law. And even in this discussion we're doing tonight, we are, first of all, conducting civic education. Because I'm telling you, go to section this of the bill. What does the bill say? It says that, for example, one of the things that we had, for example, majority of the people said that, okay, we are okay to pay the housing levy. However, we are not okay to pay for a levy and it builds houses that we don't get to benefit at all. Okay? However, we are okay to pay a levy and to support a slum upgrade. When a Kenyan tells you that, it's upon me as a legislator to go to what part of the bill does that speak to? So that speaks about how much is being allocated. Let me finish, Sam. How much is being allocated to slum upgrade? And how much is that allocated to affordable housing? And now, how do I now link all this? And that is a decision from tomorrow the Joint Committee is going to make. And I did not purport at any time, and I dare you to play any clip that I said in this discussion that said otherwise. I did not pronounce myself on any decision that the committee or the Joint Committee had, because in any case, Sam, there are times, and I'll refer you to even the Finance Bill of 2023. There were some amendments that were brought by members of Parliament from the minority side. And when you looked at them, we agreed with them, and there was not even a contestation vote because they made sense. And we believe that a good idea should give birth to a better idea, and a better idea should give birth to a better idea. And I dare And I could give reference to several proposed amendments that were made by members from opposition during the finance bill.
Okay.
That I said on the floor that as the chair of the committee, I have no objection,
okay.
and I can actually take that as a committee recommendation. In fact, even the proposed ring-fencing of the affordable housing levy towards support of only support of funding for affordable houses was on our amendment. That amendment was proposed at the floor by the member for Machakos, and we accepted it. so this is not the end. I'm just saying, Sam, let me make it clear. This is a proposal.
Right.
And before it becomes law, everyone will have to be heard. And the power of democracy... Let me finish this.
Just hold on. You've been finishing for quite a bit now. In a minute with you.
In a second.
I just want you to clarify
the people's representative will have a chance to vote on what is good for them and what's not.
And voting they will. They also voted on the Finance Act of 2023 when it was
power of democracy.
But you have just said something, that you've met members coming to the committee and saying that they support slum upgrading program.
Yes.
You've also had people telling you that stop overburdening Kenyans.
Yes.
So how do you weigh all those presentations?
The advantages, for example, in the composition of our committees, in the wisdom of Parliament, and I would really like this Kenyans to understand, in the wisdom of Parliament, what you call the departmental committees.
Yep.
These are the committees that make crucial decisions on whether they are minority members' bill or majority members' bills. Mm-hmm. They compromise both members of the majority party and the members of minority party. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the decisions that are carried out by a committee of Parliament encompasses decisions by both minority and the majority party. And this is long before the report comes to the full floor of the House.
Here. Okay. You have submissions, we support slum upgrading program deductors.
Yes.
Another one comes, stop overburdening Kenyans. People can get houses for themselves. How do you make a decision between those two?
Yes. Sam, let me try again. We have two individuals. One saying that we don't want. Let me use a very simple example.
Yeah.
One Kenyan says, I don't want housing levy. The one says, I want housing levy. These two individuals have an equal chance of representation at the National Assembly. So the decision of their voice is made, first of all, usually 99% of the time, decisions by committees are unilateral. Very few times do you find what you call a minority report from a committee of Parliament. Because usually, when a committee sits behind closed doors...
Unilateral, what do you mean?
It means that the whole committee decides on one report.
You mean? Unanimous.
Unanimous, yes.
Okay.
So, and usually, when we decide among closed doors, outside the political noise of whether it's Kenya Kwanza or the Azimio, we sit down and say, fine, so what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And should we do a vote? Or do we agree?
So eventually it's the decision of the committee.
First of all, it's the decision of the committee. And remember, the committee has both the voices of the majority and the minority, including the voice of the independents. Then from there, the report is tabled to Parliament. When it's tabled to Parliament, there are times, and I could tell about, even in the finance bill, actually, there were proposals that were even proposed, although it was a finance and committee bill, the finance bill of 2023, the leader of majority came and said, no, I don't agree with you on clause this or this. And we have a conversation. That's why there is a lot of consultation before.
Leader of majority?
Yes.
Why?
Because that decision is, for example, made by, it's made by the Committee of Finance and National Planning. And because I want to demystify the notion that Parliament is a stamp of the executive. And if Parliament becomes a stamp of the executive, then it means everyone fails. Okay, the whole house. Let me demonstrate how that is not correct. Not once, not twice. I have received, for example, in the privatization bill, now the Privatization Act, there were penalties that were proposed for people who did not, who dispose assets. So when a privatization program is proposed, like for example, there's a privatization program that's proposed, you'll find that if I'm probably the CEO of KACC or whatever, the institutions are supposed to, it's not a bill yet, but when it becomes bill, if you dispose the assets that time, or you acquire unnecessary, or you acquire credit when your institution is subject to either privatization, to privatization, and either dispose assets or acquire liabilities, there was a proposal of a fine of up to 3 million shillings. The leader of majority party sponsored an amendment. He actually moved an amendment on the floor and said, no, 3 million shillings is too little. Because otherwise, if I run a 1 billion shillings institution and I know that's going to be privatized, then I could as well dispose of, or I could easily dispose of the most worthwhile or the most lucrative asset at a throwaway price.
Okay.
And I'm telling you, when majority leader proposed that, we had to agree. And we actually voted for his amendment, and we agreed with his amendment. So what I'm telling you, that even when my committee...
Is it because of his position or what?
It's logic. And I've tried again. Let me try again.
No. Sorry, let me hear from Senator.
Let me try again. I have accepted. No. He belongs to the Senate. He belongs to a different house.
For so long.
He belongs to the Senate.
He's a parliamentarian. Just hold on.
There has been proposal.
We're still here.
Go ahead.
Senator Kajwang.
Go ahead.
So there has been this contestation. And I remember the High Court decision saying that there may be public participation and a new idea can be introduced, not necessarily having been subjected to public participation, because Parliament is given that power to make law. So even if people present their views at all these fora, what assurance is there, based on the current framework, that indeed their proposals will be taken into consideration, knowing too well that eventually, as he says, it is the committee members to take a vote?
You see, even in the budget policy statement, which constitutionally and through statute is supposed to be taken to Parliament, which means the National Assembly and the Senate, the standing committees of the Senate regularly provide feedback on the budget policy statement with county governments in mind. And I can tell you that even the views of Senate in the budget policy statement is rarely taken into account. And I've seen many cases where even public participation starts with an end in mind. We've got an end, this law must pass, and so we do it in a cosmetic manner. I'll give you another example. During the Africa Climate Summit, we had an amendment to the Climate Change Act, and that amendment was supposed to provide a legal framework for carbon markets and carbon trading. That particular amendment, first reading was on a Tuesday, second reading was on a Wednesday, and third reading was on a Thursday, and assent was on Friday, just ahead of the Africa Climate Summit. So Parliament, procedurally, there are many things we do that are not right, and that is why people go to court. If there is any bill that underwent what you'd call public participation more than Kuria's bill, it was a BBI. But when it went to court, the court said it didn't it fell below the minimum standard. And that particular BBI law, you remember, more than 40 county assemblies adopted it. And when it came to Parliament, both houses, it received overwhelming support. So I think that it is not a guarantee that there's a linkage between what the public is saying today and what Kuria is doing and what will ultimately be enacted. But thankfully, we've got the courts of law to provide the final word on the constitutionality of those measures. But something about slum upgrading, because it keeps coming up. And we have seen protesters in the streets of Nairobi with banners and posters saying that they come from the slums and big boys are trying to deny them homes. And they've been holding very peaceful protests. And how I wish that all protests would be in that that manner, because protests become unpeaceful and violent when the police start throwing tear gas and using water cannons. But I want to remind Kuria, and this comes from a report that he must be aware of. Slum upgrading, we have already established a fund called the Kenya Slum Upgrading, Low-Cost Housing and Infrastructure Trust Fund. This fund was established in 2006. 2006, you remember, that was Kibaki government. Raila was in government, Ruto was in government, Musalia was in government. And this fund, it has not been idle. This fund has implemented projects, including the construction of 12,000 housing units. And it has done projects in Mukuru slums, construction of 462 houses at a cost of 1.1 billion in Mavoko, construction of 822 houses at a cost of 2.9 billion in Kibra, Soweto East Zone. The project is being implemented by the State Department for Housing and Urban Development with funding from the World Bank. And they've got a 5-year financing cycle that ends in 2026, and it is focused on undertaking slum upgrading projects in 33 counties. What I'm trying to say is that a framework exists, multiple funds exist, institutions exist, but this government wants to solve a problem by creating another problem.
But Senator, the target is to get 250,000 units per year.
Yes, but I've just cited one. But what is the limitation? Why can't Kuria and those who are in the budget committee enhance the allocation or the appropriation to these funds? Because that allocation is done at the National Assembly. If you're going to look, for example, how much do we allocate to the various funds that have been established for housing, be it the National Housing the National Housing Corporation, which runs the National Housing Development Fund, how much money is Parliament giving it? Is it fit for purpose? Does it have proper corporate governance structures? Is the board an independent and experienced and well-qualified board that is able to drive that national housing agenda? Because even us in our manifesto as MIO, we said that we needed to establish or to ring-fence funds for construction, but we never said that it was going to be wapende wasipende.
Okay.
Because we understood the model that exists, a voluntary model that is supported by appropriations from the Consolidated Fund, and that allows these funds also to get concessional financing, and also that promotes private sector participation and development within that space. That is a difference between the Azimio promise and the Kenya Kwanza promise. Kenya Kwanza promise, they want to shake you, they want to take all the money, then they want to build for you a house somewhere on top of a hill, when perhaps you're a fisherman and you want a house next to the lake. That is unacceptable. That is unconstitutional. That is against the principles of free will and the right to property that is in the Constitution.
Honorable Kuria, please guide me. You referred to 10% deposit when you're buying the house, and some have been making presentations saying that it should be lowered to about 3.5. Please refer me to the specific provision on the 10%.
So if you go if you go to part 4 of the bill, page
what section?
No, that's not it. Yeah, page 21, 29 of the bill.
21?
No, that's not it. Hold on. Yes, page 21, 26 of the bill.
21, 26
of the bill.
What section?
Page part 1.4, section 31 says, a person who meets the criteria set out under section 30 and desires to be allocated an affordable housing unit shall make an application to the relevant agency in the manner specified by that agency. 2, an application made under subsection 1 shall be accompanied by A, approve of a requisite deposit approved by the relevant agency of at least 10% of the value of the affordable housing unit applied for.
And so
that 10% has been really contested in the public hearings.
So if you say 10%, how do you set the figure of how much that should cost? Who does that?
So they are...
And I'm raising that because the public may be contesting a percentage, but it's a percentage of what?
Yes.
Because 10% of 1 million is 100,000.
Yes.
1% of 10 million
is 1 million. And that's the beauty of public hearing. And that's why I'm telling Kenyans.
It's 100,000.
And that's why I'm telling my honorable colleague here. is that let's not just argue for the sake of it. The reason why this law needs a lot more input, and that's why the input of Kenyans across the country was not in vain, because, for example, the bill talks about a percentage, and you're right. It doesn't talk about a percentage of what. So one of the things we engaged Kenyans on was how much you think is affordable to you. So how much do you think this 10% should translate to, so that this 10% translates to an absolute figure.
Okay.
But before then, you know,
I actually want us to end up, but as you do that, please tell me. So you've had the president and members of the Kenya Kwanza administration, including your leader of majority, Kimani Ichung'wah. It appears like they're very bitter with the judiciary, but also claiming that people who captured the executive are now capturing the judiciary. What is this and what is true?
Oh, yes. So give me just a minute and then I'll get your answer. Just exactly 1 minute. Yeah. So first of all, you're talking about slum upgrade. And you're wondering, and my colleague here said, has that been captured in the bill? Page 2117 of the bill, section 11, talks about 36% of the monies from the Affordable Housing Fund shall be allocated to the state department responsible for matters relating to affordable housing for the development, maintenance, rehabilitation, and offtake of institutional housing and programs. And most importantly, section B, that 30% of the monies will be allocated to slum upgrading. What does that mean? That I agree with my colleague here.
How about 70%?
That we have had 12,000 units being developed for slums upgrading without any additional funding. So what this bill proposes is if you allocate an additional 36% out of the 80%, 80 billion shillings anticipated for collection for this from this levy, we're talking about at least 30 additional billion shillings being allocated for slum upgrade. So it actually means...
Wait. If this becomes law, how much money are you expecting to raise?
It's around 5 billion shillings a month. That is 60... no, it's okay, 80 billion shillings a year. So 36% of 80 billion, that is around 24.6 billion shillings, if my maths are correct.
Wait, the Finance Act already, according to the President, was going to generate between 60 and 80 billion. Affordable Housing Bill is going to raise the same?
So, yes, you're actually right. The finance bill, you are correct. The finance bill was raising an additional 60 billion shillings. If you remember, the housing levy in the bill, you refer to the bill, was a percentage of the basic salary. And then during public participation, it was changed to gross and made a monetary contribution. So that essentially raised an additional around 80 billion shillings on the housing levy alone, because it was no longer based on basic. If you read the original finance bill...
Sorry, Honorable Kuria, the Finance Act was raising 80 billion.
No, it wasn't.
60 to 80, I'm citing the President. At the same time, the court has said this is discriminatory. So you're widening the net to include people that are not salaried. Essentially, there should be more. Your calculation is still on 80.
So let me try again, Sam. And if you read the finance bill of 2023, it has my name on it. So it's my bill.
Yes, it does.
So the housing levy alone would raise an additional 80 billion shillings revenue. And that is a matter of fact. The whole Finance Act of 2023 was raising between an approximately 280 billion shillings a year.
I'm just talking about the housing levy, sorry.
So the house, okay, fine. You talk about the whole act.
No.
So the housing levy...
Housing levy inside the Finance Act.
Yes, was raising...
80 billion.
Was raising 80 billion shillings.
Affordable Housing Bill 2023, raising the same?
The Affordable Housing Bill, as is proposed, because the Affordable Housing Bill doesn't capture the non-salaried people. And I think I need to clarify this. So the Affordable Housing Bill is not an additional tax. And I perhaps need to make that really clear. That the Affordable Housing Bill is not an additional tax. It just puts a legislative framework to the housing levy imposed on the Finance Act of 2023.
And to avoid the discrimination, there's the incorporation of non-salaried...
That decision has not been made yet. So I'm hoping that the Committee of Finance and National Planning and that of Housing, Urban Planning and Public Works will make that decision. As we speak, the affordable housing levy is not an additional levy, is not an additional tax.
So
it is what was contained in the Finance Act.
Charging 1.5% on the gross income of a person received or accrued, which is not subject to the levy under paragraph A, that does not take care of the non-salaried Kenyans.
If you check down there, yes, and if you know, there's a time I raised up, I wanted to contribute something, and I wanted to make that clear. So, from the layman reading, it does. However, if you read further, section 5, it says an employer shall A, deduct and remit an amount referred to in section 4.2 for the gross salary of an employee. B, remit an amount equivalent to the amount deducted under section 4.2A to the collector. So, section 5 puts it a mandatory contribution to the employer and the employee and put the tax administration to the employer. That is where there's a word, shall. If you read section 6, if you go down section 6, the Cabinet Secretary for the time being responsible for the National Treasury may, on the recommendation of the Cabinet Secretary, provide by gazette notice of the question, may, on the recommendation of the Cabinet Secretary, provide by notice of a gazette that any income or class of income or any person or category of persons shall be exempt from the application of section 4 to the extent specified in the notice. So this means, by reading of law, and you have my learned friend here who could even interpret this further to us, it puts a mandatory obligation on the employer and employee, puts a tax administration mandatory to the employer to collect on both the behalf of the employer or the employee, but makes it a voluntary or a discretionary contribution of those not in the Employment Act and put the discretion to the Cabinet Secretary. And that's what I was saying, that this is one of the clauses that was greatly contested during public hearings. Because people were saying it is express that the employee pays, the employer matches that contribution, the administration of that is on the employer, but is silent on the obligation of the salary. So on the face of it,
doesn't guarantee any additional
does not guarantee any additional collection.
Right.
For the
no, but that's not correct, because I have the figures here. I think the expectation was to collect 63.2 billion through this additional levy, because the State Department for Housing had been allocated 3.6 billion. And the expectation was through AIA, which was through the affordable housing levy, the government would collect 63 billion. Some 63 billion is the amount in question in Aurora and Kimwarere. It was 63 billion Kenya shillings. Now, if we stem leakage in government, if we cut down corruption, if we can reduce wastage and the inefficiencies in government, you have no business taxing Kenyans more. 63 billion, and now you see all the effort. The nation is almost falling apart. The executive and judiciary are fighting over 63 billion, which the executive routinely wastes and mismanages. And I've just cited that is just one case. If you put together the many cases of malfeasance and graft in government, you will realize that we are taxing poor Kenyans to finance the corrupt way in government.
I think I need to hear what Kenyans are saying. Sorry, at Citizen TV Kenya, the hashtag to use is the explainer. And Boniface Siongo, you're saying that ask Honorable Kimani what is on these houses that you are so passionate about that Kenyans don't know to an extent to defy court orders. Why can't you put the same energy to build classes in schools which are in reality they are needed more than the houses? I think that's a question for you that you will respond to. Let's take a look at more feedback that is coming. Bima, you're saying that ask Honorable Kimani, if the land belongs to the public and the project is being funded by taxpayers, why is the government selling the houses? Okay. Dombori, government's imposition of a forceful housing policy dismissing citizen dissent is more than unfortunate. It's a violation of democracy. Inclusive decision-making, not coercion, is the foundation of good governance. Let's build policies that genuinely serve the people's needs. And as Musha, you said that kindly ask the MP how they selected the counties to hold their hearings in and why they discriminated against the other counties. Whew, okay. And lastly for now, Jenny Musa says that if the public speak with one voice that they don't want to be deducted, will the government listen? How affordable is the affordable houses? Yet after they are completed, again, one has to pay 3 million shillings to own one. Well, so much feedback that has come to us, and I'm sure we'll be looking at that later on. But I want to close this conversation. There are a few questions that have been raised for you, Honorable Kimani Kuria. I don't know whether you want me to begin with you in closing, or do I begin with Senator? Then you have right of reply. I think we'll begin with the Senator, the closing remarks.
I think the government must open its ears to the cry and the plight of the people. And every time I go to church, when I ask the clergy to pray for Raila Odinga, I also ask them to pray for William Ruto, so that he can wake up to the realization that Kenyans are suffering and that he can not continue taxing Kenyans to the point of despair. Generally, we Kenyans have said this is an ill thought. The courts have said this is ill thought. I want to encourage Kimani Kuria not to continue wasting public resources in an exercise in futility in the name of carrying out public participation on a bill that he himself on air he has said has got serious gaps and serious issues of definition that have not been captured. Could we kindly wait for the courts to come up with a determination on the matter so that we understand the merits or demerits and we get the directions of the court so that we do one piece of legislation that can stand the test of time. Kenyans deserve to live in decent houses, but it cannot be forced upon them. And we must avoid this idea of saying that we want to be like Singapore. In fact, sometimes it appears like the people in government think they've got the monopoly of reading about Singapore's history. When Singapore started the Housing Development Board, at the initial stages, it was not about ownership. There was a serious housing crisis, and it was to provide affordable housing for citizens to rent. It was only in the second or third decade of that initiative that they extended it to ownership, but there was a clear integration with the pensions fund because Singapore took deliberate measures to build a savings culture. So by the time they were offering these houses for sale, there was an integration between the Housing Development Board and the Provident or Pension Fund that they had established. I want to encourage Kuria because he is my friend, and when we are not fighting on podia, we are friends, we share certain professional interests. That go back, think through. If you're going to build houses, how do I get my pension benefits and use it as a deposit for these houses? Even Uhuru Kenyatta, when he attempted to bring this initiative, he had built that kind of linkage with pension funds. Let us support the private sector. The government should focus on providing public goods. Build us roads, give us water, give us electricity, provide security. So many Kenyans bought land in Konza, Kamulu, and all sorts of places, but they cannot build simply because the government has failed to provide public goods. Now the government wants to tax them so that instead of them developing their pieces of land, they can go and live in Kariako or go and live in Gara, and yet that is not their place of choice. Let the government play the role of a facilitator rather than a player, and the private sector that have appeared before Kuria's committee, from the pensions funds to the stock market to people who are already players in the real estate industry, they have diagnosed the problem.
Okay.
We must, and this cannot go without mention. Property rights. And I think there's something called DeSoto, who has spoken extensively about property rights as being the difference between countries that grow and countries that lag behind. Look at Kenya. You go and buy land in Mavoko, you put up a house, the next day the government brings it down. You go and buy land somewhere in the part of the country, the next day the government brings it down. What this government must do is to ensure that it gets credibility, that it is a government that has put in place systems for property rights to be respected. Unfortunately, And this is my final word. The government is led by someone who has been convicted of having violated the property rights of individuals. And so it might be too much to expect that this government will guarantee property rights.
Is that a fair comment, really?
It is. There was the matter in Eldoret.
That was a civil matter which was fine, it was determined. But is it fair to say that of the person of the president?
I am not making up things. The courts made a decision, and the person who was found guilty settled it out of court. You want me to revise?
All right, Senator.
I think Sam knows what I'm talking about. That someone dispossessed a neighbor of land. Those are the property rights that I'm talking about.
That's fine.
That if a country does not respect property rights and the leadership does not respect property rights, then there is no way you're going to have a boom in housing.
I have to say that that's the opinion of Senator Moses Kajwang, not that of Citizen TV. But Honorable Kimani Kuria, your final remark.
No, the difference is I will try to be as objective with this debate as I possibly can. And I tried not to bring persons that were not subject to these conversations not into the debate. The Honourable Senator talked about some upgrading that has been able through Exchequer to provide 12,000 houses. And some, you bear witness, you said that there is actually research to show, and the studies show that we need 250,000 units a year. And that's why the Affordable Housing Bill provides that 30% of the monies that are going to be collected are going to be slum upgrading. So this is supposed to accelerate the people in the slum, those people that walk every day from Lavington here to Kangemi, all to Kawangware, or all the way to the other slums, because they cannot afford to live where they actually get to work, to have a decent housing for them. Is to make sure that those people that work for us, the drivers, those people that along the people that earn the least in rural media, and across all the low-income sectors across the country, especially working in the cities, actually get to have a decent place to work. Most importantly, the bill proposes to have what you call institutional houses. Our universities, our KMTCs, one of the reasons for the greatest cause of assault and insecurity among our youth and among our university and college-going students, because they are not able to afford to live near where they go to school. Go to Technical University of Nairobi here. They have the Vice Chancellor appeared before us today and told us he has 15,000 students. But the number of students he is able to accommodate in school is 273 students, which means all those other students have to live around slums. When I came to Nairobi the first time, I didn't know any street, I didn't know anywhere. But when I was admitted to Kenyatta University, I was given a hostel, and I paid 2,700 shillings per semester. That is approximately 900 shillings a month, where I was able to walk from my hostel to my class, to the mess. And I remember you were at the University of Nairobi that time. And the same happened to you. But now, the students that are being admitted to universities are not able to attend a class and go get their books and go to lunch. And part of this bill proposes to have institutional houses for these people. Now, I think you're in Moi, not University of Nairobi.
University.
Not University of Nairobi. The Senator mentions about 3 million shillings for affordable house. That is not mentioned anywhere in the bill. And I think the reason why we have so much misconception about bills that are before the floor of the House is because we are used to people that were told, Baba amesoma. Na kama Baba amesoma, itapita kama vile Baba amesoma, including a constitution. We are living in a different constitutional moment. We are living in a different leadership.
All right.
We are living in the 13th Parliament, where we allow everyone to read, make their views, and make their amendments, and make their voice heard. So, Kenyans, we heard your voice, and you're going to see them in our report.
Your voice will be seen on the report. Yes. I have to thank you, Mheshimiwa Kuria Kimani, Chairperson, Finance and Planning Committee, but also Senator Moses Kajwang from Homa Bay County. This has been The Explainer. I hope you've understood some